Hey, good morning. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ushanka Show. Hi, random leftists. How you doing? We are starting our show. Your questions, my answers. So far, according to my statistics, I see only uh, 0 people, but we got some people commenting. I'm running this from the cell phone, so I won't be able to type answers, but thank you for joining. Oh wow, we got already 6 people. Thanks for stopping by. Well, before we get some maybe questions coming, I want to say a couple things. Quite often I get comments from several guys, and I wonder that probably young people, because they sound pretty upset with my kind of capitalistic view of life in the Soviet Union, which is kind of funny. Um, as I said, my personal opinion, I got lucky because I was born in 1971, so that was kind of the late phase of Soviet system, and life wasn't as bad as before. But like my grandparents, especially people who lived in the countryside in the villages, they had pretty hard life under Stalin and under Khrushchev, and it got a little bit better under Brezhnev. But the question that it was still not that great. And as I said, I was born and grew up when it was getting a little bit better. And I remember people mentioning like, yeah, in '80s. Stores where had more stuff than in '70s and '60s, and they didn't have much stuff at all. So I can only imagine shopping for foods or other items way back in '60s and '50s. But as I said, I just got lucky because growing up, I think as a kid it was better to be in the Soviet Union in '80s. But being an adult, I think it was extremely boring. First of all, it's probably why it's explained why so people were drinking so much. It just was really nothing to do. Like you can work hard and you still make nothing, and you couldn't travel abroad, and you have to watch your mouth because anyone can report on you, stuff like that. So yeah, uh, that's my view. Especially I have now I can compare. I lived for 25 years in Soviet Union. Well, for 20 years, right? Because I was born in 1971, so 1991 is when the Soviet Union went kaput. And then I lived for a little bit in Ukraine, and then I moved to the United States in 1998. So there was a question about what was my favorite Ushanka. Well, my first videos I was filming wearing Ushanka hat was actually my American father-in-law. He bought it, I don't remember where, but I borrowed his hat. Now I had to give it back to him. But when I was a kid, I used to have Ushanka hat. It was made out of the rabbit fur, and that was really warm and comfortable. And I used it in the winter all the time. But I like to have my flaps down to keep my ears open. When adults was always wearing them with flaps up. So. And the question is, lifestyle in Soviet Union was equal to all? Well, not really. The idea was that should be equal. But if you look with years, Soviet government, like bureaucracy people, they had access to things. It's pretty much life in Soviet Union was all about access. It doesn't matter. Like it's better to be a person who unloads trucks at the grocery store than to be an engineer, because the guy who unloads the truck at the grocery store, he's on the bottom of the pole for the people working at the store. So you have like a manager of the store that will get first dibs, and then it goes down, and then engineer needs to go stay in line trying to buy some stuff. So from that point of view, hi Oleg, we got some people from former Soviet Union joining us. So that was the situation. Then if you have access to things, then your life was pretty decent because you can trade favors. Okay, I'll get you brand new refrigerator if you get me this new pair of shoes made in Finland or something like that. So, and of course, people who had access to cash, for example, like taxi driver, waitresses. So, like in Soviet Union, if you're a waiter or waitress in a restaurant, it's actually like a really good job because you were rich by doing specific things. Like officially, you weren't making much money, but those guys were making a lot of money. But I'm planning to make a video about it. So, the question about Soviet TV views were 200 million. Total viewership is what I found was about 200 million people. So population of Soviet Union, I guess, well, combined countries was maybe what 400 million at that time if you add all the republics together. So a lot of people still had no access to TV. And like in the village that I constantly mentioned when my grandparents from on my mother's side, I would say maybe one family in 5 or less, maybe one family in 10 that own a TV, small black and white TV. Like my grandparents didn't have a TV ever. And it was one of the things that dawned on me when I was in the United States, and it's happened that I was in down Indiana. I worked at the farm at that time helping, and we had customers among Amish people. So we went to deliver fruits. So every Monday night after weekend sales, pretty much all the second grade fruits will be loaded on a truck, apples, peaches, whatever, and taken down to Amish. And this farmer, he had several dealers down in the Amish country in Indiana who were interested in buying cheap fruits because, Amish are pretty tight with their money. So we will take them down, sell it, and one time we got invited to the house to have a dinner with Amish people. So that was an amazing experience by itself because, they don't have electricity, but they had refrigerators. So that was already kind of like, holy cow, how you can have a refrigerator if you don't have electric power? Well, it turned out to be, it was a refrigerator made in Sweden that was running on kerosene. But then I wanted to use the bathroom, so, everyone in the village back in Soviet Union I knew had outhouse. So my understanding, if you're Amish, you probably have outhouse because there's no way you can have running water in the house since you have no electricity, nothing you can use. So I'm like planning to go outside asking where's their bathroom, and they said it's down the hallway. And I was like, you mean you have a bathroom indoors? They like look at me like I'm on, using some serious Amish drugs. Like, yeah, of course we have a bathroom indoors. And that's when I realized, like, holy cow, people in America, even when they refuse modern conveniences like electricity, cars, telephone, they still have indoors bathrooms. So if you have money, there'll be someone who'll make a product for you, whatever they come up with idea how to avoid those things. So there you go. There's Amish in America has an indoor plumbing, and there's a Soviet collective farm worker that never had. There's comments about, I don't have a Wikipedia on hand. I believe right now it was a Russian population around 300 million, no, maybe less, that's right. Because American population, what about 360 million? So anyways, the number 200 million I found on Wikipedia, so it's not like I'm making it up. So if you add all the countries, US population 290 million. So, well, as I said, some things, like I make most of my videos from things I remember. So, and if I trying to get a little bit more data, then I have to dig, because of course no one would tell me when I was 10-year-old kid, hey, we have 200 million viewers. But that's what the Russian Wikipedia was mentioning, that the first channel, the Central Television #1, was viewed for about 200 million people. That's what I found the numbers. So if I'm wrong, I said I'm not preaching the numbers. So hey, you got a number from Wiki too, but you have English language Wiki, which is maybe different from the Russian language Wiki, because Russian language being edited by Russians, and they might have different numbers, which is, I said, we can dig it and find out the truth. I don't mind to find myself the real truth. That's right, as Bet64 says, he's not perfect. I'm totally not perfect. And this whole, my channel is about to share my memories and give you the feeling of life in Soviet Union. If you want the exact numbers, we all have internet now on Google. It helps to find out. So yeah, if you have 290 million population, 200 million people had access to watch TV. But another thing, how do you track that? It's not like you can push the button and says. Overall, under what leader was USSR life best under? Well, Brezhnev, because that's when in early 80s, and I think it's helped a lot. The oil prices were so high, and Soviet Union started making a crazy amount of money selling oil to West countries. So basically, what Russia does now, it's when they realize there's easy money. You just install the pipeline, and we started actually getting some foreign goods. I remember we started getting some like toothpaste from England and some other items we never seen before. And of course, there's a lot of stories about how stressful it was to live under Stalin regime, but I don't have any proof. All I know is, for example, there's stories about people getting in trouble. For example, if they bring lunch to work, and of course you couldn't buy wrapping paper. We didn't have that. I mean, we had toilet paper, but like you couldn't buy paper towels. I don't remember ever toilet papers for sale. Toilet paper towels. So people would use newspaper for a lot of things. Like out in the country, everyone I knew, they used old newspapers as a toilet paper. So if you go out house and you squat over the hole, there'll be a little box with the old newspapers, and you kind of rip it in pieces and crumple it so it's softer, and then you use it. Same people were using newspaper to wrap their food to take to work, like brown bagging they call it here in America. So the guy had his wife wrapped his butterbrot, we call it, sandwich, we call butterbrot, German style. So when he unpacked it at work, another coworker noticed that there was a portrait of Comrade Stalin, and was that big, grease spot on his face. So he reported that to the, NKVD at that time, wasn't KGB, and the guy went to jail. He got sent to Siberian camps for 5 years for disrespect to the leader. So those things, this is crazy. You shouldn't have things like that. That's one thing that was huge shock for me when I moved to America, is to see how American TV and newspapers making fun of their president. It was just like, oh my God, you make this silly cartoon about Bush or Clinton and you are not going to jail for that. That was just like astounding. I still having a hard time to process that, because in Russia still, like right now, you can get in serious trouble if you're making fun of Putin. It's not acceptable. So yeah, I think it just happened that under Brezhnev, people had better life just because country started getting some money, because Soviet Union was always starving for foreign currency. Even so, like if you read a little bit about the early 30s when we were doing industrialization, and a lot of it was with the help of United States and other countries. And it's which reminds me, I think Lenin said it, that because the capitalism system, they're so greedy, they will sell us the rope, and we're gonna use that rope to hang the capitalism, which is true. When they see cash, any corporation will break the law to get that cash. Chinese, for example, they changed the strategy and they say, capitalists will teach us how to make the rope, and then we use the rope later for whatever our purposes. Because if you notice, they don't buy like factories or whatever. They just so enticing as a market. But any company that wants to make stuff and sell stuff in China, they have to teach a local company, have a joint venture, and you teach the local company how to make cars, how to make power plants, how to make high-speed trains. So Chinese, they taking their time and they're way smarter than I think they took their lesson from Soviet Union. Now, one of my viewers, random leftist, keep on asking about Romanov, this guy who supposedly could take over Soviet Union after the death of Chernenko, but it was Gorbachev who took over. I honestly have no clue. That time I was way too young to know anything about. I mean, I could probably by memory tell the last names of all the people at the power because it was constantly repeated. Like every newspaper will have a portraits of our Slyunkov, Vorodnikov, Chernenko, Andropov. You know, that was repeated so many times, but I don't think it would make any difference who was the leader of Soviet Union at the time. Soviet Union, I think, that's my personal opinion. The tree was rotten. The system didn't work. We had really poor productivity. No one really cared. And, this is horrible when, you read newspapers, you listen to the radio, you watch TV, but everyone's so skeptical. Oh, greetings from Siberia. We got some Russian people joining us. So everyone was really skeptical. It's like, yeah, whatever. They report like we had a great success. Our latest 5-year plan was total success. You go to the grocery store, is empty. You still see no changes in like people's lives. So it's like, yeah, whatever. We definitely have a lot of successes, but communism is not coming. It's not around the corner. And there was a lot of jokes, which also another thing. I'm planning to make a video about it, but they were just so-called political jokes, which could be scary. Hey, we have a Mexican watching from St. Petersburg. How about that? Hola. So, lost my train of thought. So when you see the population totally doesn't believe their government, doesn't listen to their governments, everyone just try to live their life the best they can. It's just like, okay, sooner or later, people get tired of it. It was just a question. It's pretty much, imagine, you have a dam blocking the river, and its dam is made out of clay, and just pressure was so much. So what I think Gorbachev was trying to do is just to poke a little hole to relieve the pressure. And you know what happens if you don't understand how much pressure is behind that wall. That little hole, it's just gonna burst open the whole thing, and that's pretty much what happened. Once he let it go just a little bit, it just went downhill from there. And what do people asking? What do you work in Michigan? Well, I had a blind date in 1988, and I got married in 1989. That's how I stayed in the United States, and lived here in Michigan, the Southwest. We used our hand to live, show where we live in Michigan, and I live down here, southwest corner, and I work at the power plant, local power plant. So I produce electricity. Well, help to produce electricity. Of course, never could imagine, but I got a degree of electrical engineering back from Kiev, Ukraine. Kind of little interesting fact. I finished Kiev Polytechnical Institute, same place that Sikorsky, if you know the helicopter, Sikorsky helicopters, that guy also originally from Ukraine. And so he's from the same college that I'm from, so that's kind of interesting historical trivia. So, as I said, no matter which new leader would be, Gorbachev or other, it was a question of time. It's just maybe Gorbachev speeded up a little bit, but it was already going downhill. And if you look our former allies like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, all those countries, I don't see anyone is begging to like, hey, let's restore Soviet system, let's do again, Warsaw Pact, and it's just kind of like it's gone and no one wants to go back. But there's definitely a lot of this mentality now that people say we miss Soviet Union. Under Soviet Union, our life was so much better. Well, my comparison is, imagine if you spend 70 years, well, if you can live that long in jail, And that's, what is that movie, Ushanka Redemption, right? It has that part when the guy who spent all his life in jail went out and it was just way too much. for him, so he committed suicide, and he wasn't the first one that he couldn't handle life out of jail. You have to work, you don't have any, all these new stresses that people commit suicide, or some people, I think it's known fact, they commit little federal crime, like you attack a post office worker just to get back in the long term in the prison because this is a lifestyle they like. Because, government will give you housing, free housing. This is what you get in prison. They get you cheap, crappy food. A lot of food was like bread, milk was, I'm trying to find a word, sponsored, subsidized by government. So, for example, if you compare prices for bread and vodka here in the United States, we got what? Cheap loaf of bread, maybe $1.50. Cheapest bottle of vodka is $5. In Russia, cheapest bottle of vodka was 3 rubles, so $3. Cheapest bread was 16 cents, 16 kopecks. So huge difference between bread and the vodka over there. So bread was subsidized, and actually was one of the problems that people were buying bread to feed the animals, like feed the pigs or feed the chickens, because they could make money by selling meat or eggs. So that's, you don't do that. So they had to control bread purchases. So yeah, as I said, I think Soviet Union was, there was no way around it. And if you start digging deeper, I mean, another thing that people say a lot in the comments, that if Stalin will be still at power, and this is what we hit that weakest point of socialist system. If you look, any country in the world that tried, socialism, Soviet Union, you got, Romania, Cuba, North Korea, the first leader or second leader, it's become so indispensable, like the whole system based on him. So he's at top of a pyramid, but pyramid is upside down. So when you remove that person, everything just collapses, because like no one else wants to live that way except the leader and the oppression apparatus. So if you're saying if Stalin was still alive, Soviet Union was still doing good, you are asking for one person to live forever. So it's not possible. So that means the system is doomed just because it depends on one leader must live forever. Look at Castro. Whoever became one of the first guys, it's like they never change. And this is one of the things, like if you depend on a single person, the whole system, that system is doomed to fail, because that means that most other people in the government, they're just scared of the top dog, and they're just biding their time, because now, they say, okay, Khrushchev betrayed the Stalin's ideas. Well, he was still fighting against capitalism. Remember his famous "We will bury you" and the United Nations and all those things. He actually, and that's this kind of sad thing about Khrushchev, like he gambled a lot, like Cuban missile crisis. It was a huge gamble. He won, but he pushed the whole world to the brink of nuclear war, but he got what he wanted, because, and that's what another thing kind of annoys me about American newspapers, American history. They all talking story about Cuba, starting like, we discovered by accident that, Russians sneakily, well, Soviets put the nuclear missiles in Cuba. Like, wait a minute. Who first put nuclear missiles in Turkey, right across the Black Sea? And that's what was annoying Khrushchev, because we have a double standard, because we're, United States are good guys, we can put missiles anywhere we want because we're protecting the world peace. Now if the Soviet Union does exactly the same to us, this is a threat to the world peace. Well, and so this is kind of, this story about Cuban crisis should start back and say, okay, we put missiles in Scotland and Turkey, and that get Khrushchev upset, and then we go from there. And that's kind of then, okay, then we got the same taste of the same medicine, and we didn't like it, and then we raised all the hell. So, but Khrushchev, so that was really bold. I don't think Stalin would ever dare do something like that. But Khrushchev was quite a brave guy to that, and that's what he paid for it because he got Soviet bureaucracy scared so much, so they actually managed to remove him from power because this was just too scary. We don't mind to fight against capitalism, but we don't want to get destroyed. But the things what people miss a lot about Khrushchev that he actually, cared about regular workers. Like Stalin, for him, population was just another. Hey, we got people joining from Ukraine. Hello, Pavel. Um, okay, there's a good question about access to foreign media and stuff. I'm planning to make a video about it, but I'm gonna finish my talk about. So Khrushchev, he's the one who started this program of fast building of so-called Khrushchevka, 5-story high buildings all over Soviet Union because people lived in horrible conditions. So he did that, like millions of people got their own apartments, but that's kind of like being forgotten. It's like Cuban crisis, first satellite, first person in space, Soviet Union had the first missile, nuclear missile, those things. But he actually cared about everyday normal people, and that's what was really great achievement of his. He made life of a million people better by that super fast construction of these cheap apartment buildings just to move people out of dormers. Like I told you the story, I lived in a dorm and that was horrible. So now the question about access. Of course, since the government wanted monopoly on the mass media, we had no access whatsoever to any foreign newspapers or magazines whatsoever. So the only way you can get anything is or people smuggling magazines or books, but I never seen any of those. And then people will make they will type the copies because that time you didn't have a Xerox. But the only way we could listen to broadcast on broad was this was Radio Svoboda. Yep, Samizdat is right. Samizdat was for local publishing, like authors that couldn't get published because they published something that the government didn't want, or they will be bringing some from America, whatever countries, and publish some books or articles that we never seen. But the only way they will be listened on the radio on ultra short or short waves, KV, KV1, KV2. So there'll be Radio Freedom, German Wave, Немецкая волна, BBC. So there'll be these radio stations will be having broadcasts in Russian, but those were jammed really bad. So it actually was one of my things. I gotta make a video about it, but yep, short waves. Thank you. One of the things I enjoyed on the weekend, well, on Sundays, since I had to go to school on Saturday, but Sundays, my dad, it was his morning thing, is like early morning, maybe 6, 7 a.m. He'll get his geolog, what's it called? The radio was a lot of, similar to like you can buy Grundig radios. So it had a lot of different, KV1, KV2, shortwave 1, shortwave 2. And start scanning those radio waves, trying to catch broadcasts from Western Europe. As I said, this will be Radio Svoboda, Radio Freedom. There'll be American radio stations. So they had transmitters close to the border as possible. And then on our side, there'll be big jammer antennas will be jamming the frequency. So when you try to listen to these stories, there'll be constantly this loud noise overlapping. So this is how hard they thought about any information coming from overseas or so, Yep, Voice of America, thank you. Голос Америки, that's right. Голос, I think it was also Свободная Европа, free Europe. So that would be my thing to do in the morning. I'll climb in with the bed, my dad, when he's laying there on the couch, and he'll be, he'll get the radio station going. And I'm listening and they say stuff which will be like, blows my mind because we never heard anything like that. They say, oh, there was a ship, um, maybe like cruise ship stopped or freight ship stopped somewhere in Hamburg, and 10 people asked for political asylum and abandoned. I was like, I don't remember our radio station saying. I was like, why would people wanna leave? I love Soviet Union now today. So yeah, so this news will get, and of course, they'll say in the newspapers or radio like how horrible the lies coming from overseas. There'll be a lot of cartoons about this, you know, like these ugly looking people look, and they have a label that says, Voice of America or Freedom, and they spit in these lies. Um, I'm peacing out. All right, see you, Jeffrey. So that was another question. How bad was Chernobyl? Well, they never told us. There's another thing. When everything is government owned and government controlled, like our government couldn't make their mind what to tell the people about what happened. So we had classical music playing for so long on the radio. So there's a rumors going on in Kiev. What's happening? Like, yeah, we heard is that Chernobyl had an accident, but wasn't much than that. And then, of course, there's another rumors like all the Soviet officials evacuated their families out of cities. Like, wow, this is probably really bad. And only because of those liars radio stations like Radio Freedom from abroad, they started saying like, hey, you shouldn't eat any fresh food, don't drink any fresh milk, stay indoors, close your windows, it's really bad, we don't have information. But looking at what we have, reports about radiation cloud in Western Europe, you have it really bad over there. So that's how we learned. So when the government don't tell you the truth, but the people, liars from overseas, tell you the truth, you know how bad it is. And now I know a little bit more because I work with people who used to work like in the Navy, United States Navy, and they say like, hey, we had this alert on the air carrier in the middle of Atlantic. Suddenly our radiation levels went up and we thought we have a leak. And it turned out that was the cloud from Chernobyl over the Atlantic Ocean, and it was bad enough to trigger alarms on the American air carrier. Then Navy base in Scotland, same story. All their American submarines there went on alert and went in the ocean because they got alarms, high radiation outside alarms. So they got procedures. You consider you have a problem, so you leave right away, going for ocean, trying to figure out what's going on. And it turned out to be also that was a Chernobyl. And even West Coast, California, nuclear plants in California, power plants, they noticed the rise of the radiation levels outside, so they were all scrambling, trying to figure out what's going on. And that's West Coast United States had general radiation levels rising slightly. I mean, not much, but they got sensitive equipment there. So you can imagine what was going on in Kiev, and especially in Chernobyl. So that was really bad. But, they never told us. And as I told you in the story, actually I found the letter that somebody asking, when do you live in Kiev, did you ever experience a gopnik? No, it's people who like steal your stuff. I got harassed a little bit, but our area where we lived, we didn't have that bad of an issue. I mean, there were some like bad boys maybe sitting there playing guitar, drinking beer and smoking in the evening, but we didn't have that issue that people will stop you and take your money. I know there's some areas, I don't remember in Kiev, anywhere you go around Kiev was pretty safe. I know the stories like, for example, if you had Levi's jeans in the early 80s, it could be that you can get stopped and they'll make you strip your pants because those were like 300, 400 rubles, huge money. Like you're wearing a lot of money on you. They'll be like, some, I don't know, compare level with some super expensive purse, for $10,000 or watch that people make you take it off. So I don't have, in Kiev it was pretty safe everywhere. I mean, you can wander around late night anywhere you go and you're pretty safe. There are some smaller towns where it was like workers, dormers, and youth was pretty rough. They maybe have some issues with gopniks. In Kiev, I never had experience like that. I mean, I got harassed, but not for like taking my money. We got about 28 people watching, so it's a nice surprise. I was wondering how many people would gather, so thank you for joining. Why did cab drivers and restaurant servers get paid so much? Well, there's the thing. It's because they had access to cash. They didn't have, like, their official salaries were pretty low. I think one of the highest paid people in Soviet Union were coal miners. They were making like 500 rubles a month, 600 rubles, and then they get bonuses for if they get more coal. And of course, maybe if you're a professor, some really high level scientist, you may be making 600 rubles. Then, of course, like high level government officials. But if you wait in tables, maybe your salary 80 rubles a month. Taxi driver maybe 150 rubles a month, but you have access to cash. So, and I'm planning to make videos about it because this is kind of tells you how the whole system is backwards. So you have people who wait in tables. Yes, I did use fountain payment ink pens in early first, second grade, but not the ones you dip the ink pen. It has a little container that you kind of, one has like a rubber squeegee kind of thing. You create a little vacuum and suck it in. Some of them were like you twist it and it makes a little portion, like valve moving in, and it sucks the ink in, and then you write with it. That's one of the reasons why teachers were making sure that every kid switches to be right-handed, because if you write with the ink pen with the left hand, you're making a huge mess. So, for example, a taxi driver, they could just use the company car to do some deliveries on the side without recording it and keep the cash. Like I know one of my schoolmates, a guy who went to school with, his father was a taxi driver, and it's like a stories about him. He coming home and bringing tons of change and rubles, and they sit and count. So he can make extra, 30, 50 rubles a shift, while his salary 100 rubles a month. Then they could, if the gas was spare, they can sell extra gas. There's a lot of ways they could game in the system to make extra money. When it comes to waitresses, first of all, restaurants had different supplies than the grocery stores. Like in restaurants, they will serve you caviar and some other, would call it fancy foods, which people really want to buy. So all you need to do is maybe use less caviar on a sandwich or something like that, and then you just, whatever you manage to set aside, you just sell on the black market and make a killing. So that was the way pretty much you serve a little bit less meal and you sell it. So, or for example, I was told that one of the way waitresses were making money, for example, was very popular to celebrate like weddings in the restaurant. So you pay so much money and they give you the list what they're gonna serve you. There'll be so many sandwiches, there'll be this, that, so much alcohol. But then when they bring it all, there'll be less, a little bit less, and of course, when everyone is drunk and all that, you don't really track all that stuff. So they knew how to work the system there, and then they will serve other people same stuff from the wedding and get all that money, because we didn't have checks, we didn't have credit cards, nothing. It was cash only. So all that cash will go in the pockets of waitresses and the people at the kitchen. They split it. So if you're a waitress in a waiter in some popular restaurant, you're making a lot of money. And I know like tipping, giving tips was not popular in Soviet Union at all, but in restaurants, people will be tipping, like, there'll be other people who making a lot of extra cash, and they will be generous to tip people in the restaurant. So yeah, the people, if you wait in tables in some really fancy restaurants, you probably will be driving a lot of car. You might bought it somewhere paying double. If it'd be 9,000 rubles, you can pay easily 15,000 just to get a car. so that's how. So they weren't well-paid jobs. They were jobs that you can make money, you know, illegally, technically, but because you had access to cash and more importantly, had access to goods which you could resell. Like black market was huge in Soviet Union uh, because it was shortage of everything. Like we had a word deficit, very popular because everything was in short supply, pretty much almost everything. So if you have access to these goods, you can just buy it and then turn around and sell it for double the price. And so if you have access to foods, specific clothing, shoes, you'll be sitting pretty. So you might like Soviet system because you just happen to be in the right place. Now there was a question: what do I think about Americans that thinking that social system was good and life was good? You know, this is why I created this channel because I want to share my. I lived there. I got lucky, I guess. You know, and it's not often this combination that person who lived in Soviet Union for so long and has a good English to and a good memory. And I kept a lot of diaries, so I can you know, I don't remember what I did last week, but for some reason I still remember what I did when I was 4 years old. So when I realized that there's this thing going on, like people have total misconception about life in Soviet Union, or just have no idea, because if I share stories at work, and I work with Americans, you know, a lot of the stories they're just really surprised. I like decided, well, it looks like there's a, you know, it's far enough now in past that a lot of people grew up, they have no idea. And of course, now we have this thing going on in the United States, is people thinking like, well, if the government just take over everything will be great. You know, we'll get free education, we'll get free medical care, we get free this, free that. That word free is really attractive for many people, and they're like, oh, hell yeah, free sounds good. You know, then it means I don't have to work and I'll get everything for free. And that's what got Soviet Union in trouble. And then you have enough freeloaders, and people who work, they just don't want to work hard. You know, that's how productivity goes down. Now was a question about, is it safe to go American tourist? Well, Ukraine you'll probably save because you know, Russia right now probably not a good time to be in Russia being American, since there's, you know, quite an anti-American sentiment government does. So you know, they cut embassy staff, and I kind of heard that, you know, people who work in American embassy in Moscow, they get harassed like politely by modern KGB. Like they constantly, somebody would be walking behind you, like obvious watching you, not like hiding maybe a little bit behind. There's just a guy just following the person every time they go anywhere, a grocery store or something. So Russia probably not a good time right now. Ukraine, you know, since kind of America supports Ukraine in their struggle against Russia, I think they're more friendly, but still, I don't live in Ukraine for over 20 years, but personally I feel safe being there, and you know, I speak Russian in Ukraine. No one harasses me because I kind of grew up, yeah, free tour guide. I don't think it's a tour guide, but it could be annoying. But as I said, there's just a lot of people, unfortunately, people still watch too much TV, and it's in Russia right now, TV, it's all government controlled, so there's a huge anti-American sentiment, and a lot of it is just, it's for me just scary to watch. I don't know, watch much, but sometimes it comes up on YouTube, like, they're talking like, hey, we developed this new missile system and we can easily turn America into nuclear desert. Just the whole fact that person will say that on TV, that hey, our system, we are the only country in the world we can turn Russia and America into a nuclear desert. It's just, you don't say stuff like that, you know. Well, you don't say also that you can grab any woman by the pussy, but at least you don't turn the country into nuclear desert by grabbing somebody by the pussy. Anyway, so Russia, I would say probably, you know, if you stay in a popular tourist destination with a lot of other tourists, you may be okay. But of course, if you wear, you know, t-shirt with big American flag and stuff like that, you might have some weird looks, and then people will be telling you something like, "Oh, you stupid Americans, go away from here," you know, because a lot of it is just like the whole theory: life is bad in Russia because America is not letting us to rise from our knees, and you know, the corruption is doesn't matter. You know, we always live like that. But if America would leave us alone, and if we can, you know, just do our thing, then everything will be great. So. When I visited East Germany in 1987, the Free Stasi agents showed me around East Berlin. Well, how were religious minorities like Jews and ethnic minorities treated in Soviet Ukraine? You know, it's a good question. I don't think we had any issues. Like, I had an Armenian guy in my class. We had no issue with him, but he spoke in fluent Russian. Like, I was Ukrainian, but most schools in Kiev were Russian speaking. We never treated him any bad. He was just another kid. But I remember one time I went to see him or something. So when his father opened the door and he spoke like Russian with a really strong Armenian accent, I was like, wow, you know, your kid speaks fluent Russian and you like. But no, it was pretty much friendly. Now when it came to like Africans, surprisingly, we had a lot of racism there because we had some students from Africa going to Kiev University, and there was a lot of people, like, there was a lot of racism, especially when the Ukrainian girl will start dating a black guy from Africa. Like, if they ever have a kid, so that kid will be harassed in school. So that was pretty nasty. It was surprising because, like, officially government was always like, hey, international freedom, you know, we support yellow people, black people, brown people. But on the everyday life, like, those Africans, they could be beat up even during the Soviet Union. It's just for some reason. Same with Vietnamese. Wasn't that friendly, unfortunately. Now with Jewish people, I had one guy who was I never even knew that he was Jewish till I met his parents. He was totally fine. We had one Jewish girl in our class. She was fine. We didn't harass her or nothing like that. She was just another person. The only time we had an issue, well, it's kind of, I don't know, you know, like when we were 8th grade, 9th grade, we were required to go and help collective farm to like harvest because there was a lot of manual labor. It was literally like, okay, this Saturday instead of school, and it's your part of your labor training, we all will go, you know, the buses will arrive, we're going to help collective farm to harvest. I remember we harvested beets, harvested cabbages. You know, you just go in the field and you harvest by hand and you put in a truck. So that was the only time, and that girl, all I know, she was totally healthy. I mean, she was going to the physical education, running, doing all this stuff, she was fine. But every time we have this collective farm deal going on, she'll bring a paper from the doctor that she has something health-wise that she cannot go and work. So when it came to manual labor, suddenly she had some heart issues. You know, when everything else was totally fine. So kids got upset, and actually one guy said something like really rude about why we use, you know, there's a word Jewish, Еврей, and there's a word Żyd, which is Polish word for Jewish, but it was kind of derogatory. So he kind of said, why this old Żyd girl never goes and works with us, and we all burst laughing. So the girl started crying, and then, you know, so that's the only time I remember that what happened. But I don't want to say it was the reason for it, but have you ever ridden in Chaika? No, unfortunately. Volga was the coolest Russian car, Soviet car I've ever ridden. It was a taxi. Chaika, no, I wasn't in the government, and I wasn't a pretty girl to be invited to ride in Chaika. So yeah, that was, but kind of like there's it's like, why every time it comes to manual labor, a Jewish person has bad health. When it comes to everything else, they're fine. How did you react when the Soviet Union collapsed? We all were happy. Like, it felt, like you finally have the window open and fresh air came in. Like, there was a lot of excitement. But, it's like then when the windows is open too much and room gets too cold and you start freezing, then you're realizing this whole freedom thing was kind of, it was a great idea, but unfortunately, people who were communists, they still remain at power. So, what do you expect? What kind of changes do you expect from the former communists who still, at the power? They just pretty much, first they were dragging feet. If you look at Ukraine, they elected, like, first president of Ukraine, Kravchuk, communist, second, former communist. Uh, so they basically like, oh, now we can run things and we can steal all this stuff, because we had this whole privatization process in Ukraine and same in Russia, and it was a giant scheme. I'm planning to make videos about it. I finally kind of got footings with my channel because I wasn't sure how to present and what kind of topic to cover. But then I realized if I just go chronologically from my childhood and up, then we'll go all the way to 1991 and a little bit later how the whole privatization scam went. But every person in Ukrainian citizen, got this certificate, which is like you have a chunk of Soviet property, former Soviet property, is now yours, and you can invest it. So that was the way how they were. That's how they they created stock market that way. And honestly, I never met anyone yet who invested that money and actually getting some kind of dividends. There's a question: would you rather live in USSR before Andropov or under Putin today? Okay, so let me finish previous one. So yeah, and like I invested those companies in business, and I never got a penny out of this. One was it's a trucking company, and one is a port in Odessa that handles like bananas or the groceries, and they're doing fine. But we didn't ever seen a single penny out of that money. But I know the people, like there's people being killed for the control of that port. So there's huge money going through there, but of course I never seen on my parents. So I invested, I think, smart, but system was smarter than me. Well, first of all, I want to say I never experienced living under Putin, and in the beginning I was very excited for Russia, even I'm being from Ukraine, because Yeltsin was real embarrassment for the country. Still like I lived in Soviet Union, but I feel for people. Like I don't care about governments, honestly. Like for me, doesn't matter if the Ukraine will be right now part of Soviet Union or part of Russia or separate country. If people's lives will be better, this is what matters. Because if you look, no, I never seen different Russia. I honestly don't watch any other channels when it comes to similar topics. I just discovered there was something, Real Russia channel. Apparently, a guy 5 years running the show has 100,000 subscribers, which is quite impressive. But he talking more about modern Russia. I'm more like way in the past 40 years. So people had a quite improvement in life, but a lot of things like Putin brought back, government control, mass media, but now it's all about protecting his cronies. Everyone who managed to get to the government, they just driving nice German cars. Who knows where the money came from? And there's something wrong with the system. I remember reading an article, but that was about Spain many years ago. It says when you see fancy cars driving on the horrible roads, you know that the country is in trouble. And that's what a lot of it in Russia, like you see fancy, very expensive, like Mercedes G-Wagon SUVs driving on the horrible roads. So money instead of going to the roads, they go, people who steal that money and buy nice vehicles. I mean, we had to keep our mouth shut on the Andropov or on the Brezhnev. You could get in trouble for saying so-called political jokes, and I mean they were quite popular. Especially when Brezhnev barely could speak. There was a lot of jokes about his poor style or stupid things you would say. Uh, right now, if you say something about Putin, I mean, look how many people got killed that were talking about against the system. So definitely not a good time right now to have opposite views. Like if you look in America, it's much safer, I think, to be opposite the government. Look how people treat Trump. I didn't vote for the guy, but I didn't vote for Hillary either. But this is what price of the freedom, that if you're in the government, you can have ears full of bad words about you, you know. So, and in Russia, just mentality is different. If you're in the government, everyone else must keep their mouth shut. But as I said, in the beginning, when you could tell Yeltsin was just alcoholic, showing up drunk, and still he was so much, for so long in power, because people who were stealing stuff from, oligarchs, they just kept him, as a cover while doing their deeds. I didn't vote for Jill Stein. I voted Libertarian. First time, like before, way back, since I'm immigrant, and I thought Democrats kind of more friendly towards immigration, so I was kind of Democrat. But then after voting first time for Obama and I watched what he did or didn't do, I realized either Democrats or Republicans is the same coin, just two different sides. I mean, they all work for the same people. So I started looking more into libertarian things. But if there's a comparison, okay, we should have spent $1 billion giving free stuff to people in the country, or spend $1 billion bombing, some other country, I prefer that money being spent here than spent overseas. So that's pretty much the differences between Republicans and Democrats, is money being wasted here or there. So anyway, when the Putin came instead of Yeltsin, I was very excited for Russia, because it wasn't, and he kind of started going after oligarchs, but I didn't understand why. I thought he wants to restore, I say the word fairness, but he was pretty much telling people, you have to share or I'll take you down, and everyone is, except like Khodorkovsky and Berezovsky, who thought they kind of like untouchable now. Everyone else agreed to the new conditions, and the one who didn't, they not dead, or they're not alive or in jail. So that's what kind of my views on that. I'm kind of libertarian. I don't say I'm strict, but is, you see that what government control and of everything did to Soviet Union, it's exactly the same thing can repeat here in America, but it's a little bit different flavor. And every market is controlled by one or two corporations, and they have a total influence over the government. And like, in my personal view, all these, freebies that the government gives to people, like, all these food stamps and other things, it's pretty much they pump in taxes through the poor people in the pockets of corporations. Because, when they, how much food stamps money Walmart gets, it's insane. So it's they pretty much sponsoring big corporations through taking the taxes of people's tax money and pushing them through, or creating some war somewhere else, or giving money to poor people, and of course then for some reason they can buy soda or pop, whatever you call it, right? So you sponsoring Pepsi by providing food support. Like, my personal opinion, we kind of drifted away from Soviet Union to America, is I don't mind to help people who have problems. So like, if you're handicapped, or shit happens, right? But that help should be uncomfortable. It's like, you should be, how to say it, like, you getting free food, for example, or some other like assistance with housing, but it should be uncomfortable. Like you want to get off that as quick as possible. That's the whole idea. You shouldn't be comfortable getting freebies. So if you get free food, it's not like, hey, there's a $600 on your card and you can go buy chips and pops and steaks. I mean, there's stories all the time. Uh, uh, people loading with crab legs and premium steaks and then paying with the bridge card, when people who work and they just watching every penny and prices per pound. And I had experience with a couple of years ago in Aldi. I shop a lot of Aldi, and I drive a little Honda Fit car, and I'm middle class. So this lady, she has a huge cart full of food, pays with bridge card, so free food for her. Then we go outside and I pay cash after her. I go outside. So here's me loading my little tiny Honda Fit because it has great gas mileage. And there's this lady, she has a huge giant GMC Acadia SUV. With free food, and there's the guy who's upper middle class loading his little Honda Fit with food he paid for cash. So there's something wrong with this picture, right? So if they make this uncomfortable, and I'm totally okay. It's like, hey, we will be tracking where you're at. You shouldn't be in the dance clubs. You shouldn't be in the bars. If you want money support from government because you can't afford something, then we'll track you where you're at. We need to know what you're driving. It's like, like NSA surveillance. This is the technology should go after, not people. Like we need to know what everyone is doing in the United States. We've been through that in Soviet Union when KGB wanted to know what's going on. So same here, but you should go out to the people who are, for some reason, need assistance. So if you going constantly to dance clubs and nightclubs and you're getting money from the government because you need food money, it's like there could be both. Or you're getting because you have a problems, or you need to go start working. So this is my view on all this money issues. Same with taxes. There's so many loopholes for the upper 1%. I mean, you can raise those taxes to 100%. They still, if you keep those loopholes open, they won't pay taxes. So all these things kind of what's going on. So anyway, well, I will be finishing this live with about an hour. So every time, my kind of rule for the YouTube channels is that every time we reach 1,000 people, new 1,000 subscribers, we'll do live to celebrate. Just to tell you my common plans. First of all, I will be making a video, I think, about Russian radio, because we covered TV. Then we'll do Russian radio, Soviet radio, then maybe Soviet newspapers, magazines. Then I want to talk about a little bit of details. And I appreciate everyone for joining in. Thank you very much. And we'll see you on YouTube later. Have a good weekend. До свидания. Goodbye.